Mr. Raccoon, won't you play with me somehow? No, I can't, we are too hungry now. It was the only raccoon I had. I mean, I could have pulled out Chopper since he always gets referred to as a tanuki, and this is basically about tanukis. They're about transforming raccoons and everything like that in Japan. But this was the only one that I actually had, I think. I don't remember if I have any other raccoon plushies anywhere. I'm like, I might, but I don't remember if I'm thinking of that or a red panda plushie that I have. That's buried somewhere in my closet, so I don't remember. So we have this little tiny guy here for a Beanie Baby one. Raccoon. Okay, I'm actually recording this the day after Thanksgiving, where I didn't actually celebrate Thanksgiving at all on Thanksgiving this year. We had our family Thanksgiving with my dad's side of the family the Saturday before Thanksgiving, so that was nice. And such. So on Thanksgiving itself, my dad and I just kind of just relaxed, watched the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade with the giant Luffy balloon, and had pizza for lunch that we made. So that was our day. And then I recorded the One Piece review, and then now I'm recording this the next day, which won't go up until like 2 Sundays from now, or whatever, when I'm actually recording this. So time to talk about Pom Poko, which came out in 1994. It is, of course, via Studio Ghibli. While Miyazaki was not the director of it, he was part of the story planning of it and one of the producers of it. And Isao Takahata is actually the one who wrote and directed it. And it was his first original work that he had written and directed for Studio Ghibli. Now, this movie delves into the kind of the story and the mythology of the transforming raccoons, tanuki, stuff like that, stuff that, Chopper gets made fun of being in One Piece, and in this case, in, Pom Poko, they are raccoons whose forest is being destroyed because of development during the 1960s and into the 70s, that they end up, forming up into this group trying to figure out a way to stop the humans from developing their forest and taking their land and their food and everything like that, which is fair. And again, it is this, Miyazaki is not this hugely, he's not the one that wrote or directed it, but it is very much this nature conscientious movie, as is a lot of the Studio Ghibli movies tend to have that theme. Spirited Away has that there. Nausicaa has that in spades. So many of the different movies have kind of that undertone there of, humans and nature having to figure out how to coexist. In some cases we succeed, in other cases we fail. Some cases it's somewhere in the middle. The movie does kind of have a bit of a hopeful ending, which is nice, which I'll get to. So going into the actual story, this movie has a lot of very good narrations or very good monologues throughout the movie, because they're kind of telling the story from the raccoon's point of view on a lot of these different subjects, in regards to like what they think about what's going on in the world and everything like that. And kind of how they go from like their simple perspective of being raccoons living near humans all the way up to the end of the movie for how they end up kind of dealing with humans in the end. So there's a lot of good monologues throughout the movie, which is very nice. And I know that the Japanese versions of the monologues are probably a little bit different than the English monologues. Give or take a little bit for how they want to, set stuff up for how, colloquialisms go through and stuff. But for the most part, I think they can probably keep those pretty similar. There might be a couple of different jokes in the English dub that's not in the Japanese dub, and vice versa, obviously. But so we have that. So it starts off where it's just the raccoons have this peaceful life, and they live on these near farms because they eat, the frogs and mice and stuff like that live near farms because they go after what humans have. They also eat like the dead, the fallen fruit that's on the ground that humans don't eat, and they don't really bother humans all that much. And then, there's this, we kind of get this perspective of like, we found this old abandoned farmhouse that nobody was going back to. So we moved in, and that was a great year. And then the construction came, and it's supposed to be that all of the forest is being, redesigned into residential developments, which in Tokyo during the 1960s, the late 1960s and into the 70s, there was this huge economic boom to the country. And, within Japan itself, but in Tokyo, there was this huge boom to the country in regards to their economics and their, GDP and everything like that, and population boom after World War II. So there was a lot of, people, needing places to live. So they had to start developing suburbs and everything like that around Tokyo and even further out. And that is very true as to what happened. I don't know how much of so many different incidents that happen in this movie are referred to things that maybe happened in real life. But overall, like the development of the New Tama Hills, which is where the majority of the movie takes place, is within the New Tama Hills development, where the forest is, and then moving into the actual development area. I don't know how much of that is true, but it's based off of, I think, real events that happened in regards to how this development would have affected the animals in the area and stuff. Eventually it ends up getting to the point where the raccoons end up, because their forest is shrinking on them via the encroachment of humans and deforestation and everything, they end up forming into bands. This team is red team, this team is blue, red versus blue. Never actually seen red versus blue. I know about it, but I don't know anything about it except I think that it involves Halo. Please don't hate me. And, so we get that, and we see like these two sides fighting against each other. The red is led by Ganta, I believe, and then the blue is led and the blue is read by Sezemon, I think is his name. Some of the raccoons have interesting names, and it's hard for me to remember which ones are which necessarily. So they're all fighting. The two sides are fighting against each other, and we see that the raccoons are kind of transforming to a degree. They're having armor and different weapons forming. They're using sticks as weapons. They're, transforming different things and each other, going from more real-looking raccoons to more cartoonish-looking raccoons to very cartoonish-looking raccoons, and fighting against each other. And then we have it that the elder, one of the elder female that is kind of one of the leaders within their community, comes out, and she's, banging on this kind of drum thing and trying to get everybody's attention, and she's, spouting off this chant, blue, blue, kill the red, 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 knock blue dead, going back and forth about, like, putting out all the different problems that's going on right now. It's, slaughter everybody, kill each other, wipe each other out, that's your plan. And, it's actually a rather very disturbing thing that she's going through and reading, or saying as she's chanting, trying to get all of them to stop fighting, as she's scolding them like children. And she's like, yeah, you'll notice that while you were fighting, the forest went away, and if you don't stop soon, it's going to be too late for us to do anything about it. Because by the time you guys are done with your stupid fighting about this, the forest is going to be gone, and there's not going to be any hope left. So we should stop fighting each other and try to figure out a way to fix this. And of course she points out, eventually both sides stop, and she points out that there is this whole section of the forest that is already gone, and that the raccoons all need to work on figuring out a better way of doing this. So it explained that they have this whole big council that's brought together where it's like all these different raccoons from the forest all gather at this temple, this abandoned temple, and they nominate this very old raccoon who's 100 years old. His name is Osho, which just means monk, which I only know that because of Bleach now. And he's this 100-year-old raccoon, and he is, kind of like the leader of the group. And then we have Oroko, who is the female raccoon, and then several other, elders within the raccoon community are all kind of, they're all kind of nominated to this kind of like committee to try to figure out a plan for what they can do to try to fight against the humans. So after that, all the younger raccoons and the other ones who are not elders all leave, and then the rest of the raccoons that are this committee are working on what they need to do. So they figure up a way of, okay, here's our 5-year plan. We are going to do a bunch of research on humans, and we are going to work on reviving the ability to transform, the art of transformation within the raccoon community. Some of the raccoons are basically able to do basic forms of transformation, as we saw already with them being able to like change their clothes and stuff like that, and change weapons and objects and things like that. But this would be trying to work on much more complex versions of transforming, including making themselves a lot bigger, a lot smaller, different things like that. Very much manipulating what they can look like, including turning into humans and different things like that. And the other part is they want to research humans, and eventually they want to go and try to find the transformation masters on these other 2 islands where they live. And to do that, the elders are all just like, none of them want to go because they're notoriously lazy. And like during this, like throughout the whole movie, it is narrated. It's narrated perfectly by, in the English dub, it's narrated by Maurice LaMarche, aka Brain from Pinky and the Brain, if you want to reference there. He's also just been in so many different animated movies over the years, and animated shows, and so many different things like that. He's perfect. Also, Tress MacNeille, also, who is Dot in Animaniacs and Mom in Futurama, is in this. As Oroko, who is like the head female raccoon. So there's a lot of really good voice actors in this that are really good with cartoon voice acting, but they're really good at doing these serious stuff as well. So we get that, so that's just fun in general listening to it. But they're like, okay, so we need to figure out how to get to the transformation masters. The older raccoons, none of them want to go because they're lazy. And even throughout the movie, they address like the stereotypes of raccoons of like certain ones are lazy, certain ones do this, certain ones do that, and everything like that. And like they'll pick any excuse to party and different things like that. So we have like that type of stuff that gets kind of made fun of throughout the movie, and not necessarily denied by the raccoons themselves, which is just funny. So what ends up happening is, after that, they just all bring out these hamburgers and they chow down on the hamburgers, which is just kind of funny. And then they're all just like stuffed full. Then it's like, okay, so they find this television that they bring back to the temple, that is this television that was just dumped. And they bring it back to the temple and hook it up, so now they have television, which of course leads to so many of the raccoons just being fascinated by the television and watching cooking shows and talk shows and wrestling and all this other stuff during the day, as opposed to going to do other stuff. So it's like, okay, well that was helps us research humans, but that wasn't the best answer in how to do this. So we have that, and then we have Oroko is starting to train the younger raccoons, and she is explaining that lesser forms of transformation, such as changing color, can be achieved by chameleons, for example, but the true art of transforming can only be practiced by foxes, raccoons, and a few cats. And so she is instructing this group of young, it starts off as mostly just the young male raccoons, because depending on stuff, I guess it's a lot of the females are still dealing with like kits or cubs, raccoon cubs and stuff like that, depending on such. But it's mostly like the male cubs that we see at first, or the male like teenage versions of raccoons, I guess, are there. and she's working on instructing them, and she's pointing out the fact that just because the fact that you are able to change your appearance like that means you've already mastered the rudimentary technique of transformation. So she's going through, and she does this demonstration of changing herself into it's like I think it's a version of like a cooking pot is I think what she changes herself into as like a demonstration. And they're like, well, don't you have to put a leaf on your head to do that? And she's like, no, that's for amateurs. And so she is able to transform rather easily. Maybe she's not as practiced in it as she was when she was younger, but she is still very good at transforming. So is Osho, who is the old monk. And then we have several of the other elder raccoons that are rather good at transformation that are working on trying to train the younger group. So as this is going on, we get to see as the different raccoons are training. Some are much better at it than others. Some take to it rather easily, different things like that. And then we also have ones that are just not as interested in transforming because they're not as gifted as other raccoons are, so they're a little bit more easily distracted and stuff like that. So we kind of have that, and then we're introduced to Shokiki, who is kind of like the main younger raccoon during this whole thing, who kind of ends up stepping up throughout the course of the movie. And he is actually quite gifted at transforming, and we get his version of a monologue where he's explaining that he actually has spent a lot of time observing humans. And according to his father, that's a good way of trying to train yourself to be able to transform. So Shokichi is a little bit ahead of the curve. While his best friend, who is not as skilled in transforming, is much less interested in it. So we get these training sequences where we see a bunch of the, male raccoons working on transforming, and it's explained that, when it comes to transforming into like actual looking humans, they can pull off, male teenagers, males and stuff like that pretty well, but they can't really do little kids very well, and they can't really turn into women very well. It doesn't work very well. So we have that stuff going about. And we also have like the old monk giving them, lessons and stuff like that about, not being so easily persuaded by humans. One of the things that we see throughout the movie is there are lots of different chants that apparently were, used to be done, where it was like chant to the raccoon, and the raccoon can be tricked into chanting back. And so they're like, you need to be careful not to do that and everything like that. And what ends up happening is it's like, once winter is over, then spring begins, and that's kind of when the urge to mate starts coming about, which is like, it's like, oh no, they're Twitter pated is what popped into my head, because of course Disney nerd for Bambi. I think I heard they're trying to do a live action Bambi. I don't know how I feel about that. It all depends on what they're planning on doing. I don't know if I want them to do the live action Lilo and Stitch. I know that. I'm not exactly sure where I fall on that. It all depends on what they want Stitch to look like. Because that's the key of that, is like, how realistic you gonna make Stitch? How creepy, how cute, where are you gonna make it fall? But back to this. So most of them are Twitter pated, which is most of the males trying to chase after the females, but of course, they're all trying to remember Oroku's warning about having more cubs, and that could result in things becoming even worse, which, spoiler alert, later on in the movie, it becomes worse because there's more cubs. But the females kind of fight off the males and get them to, kind of are the ones kind of avoiding them and everything. And a lot of the males are trying to, resist mating and everything like that as well, some better than others and everything. So eventually it gets to be to the point where, because the females don't have to worry about taking care of the kids, they're able to start trying to train as well, and several of them excel in transformation and stuff like that. And they eventually end up getting to the point where they're much better at transforming into children and females. They try to transform into males, it doesn't go as well, similar different types of things for different types of transformations and stuff like that. One of the things that ends up getting pointed out, or that gets explained by Osho, the old monk, to all of the male raccoons, is that so the talking about lower regions here for raccoons, and this movie, oh god, this movie when it comes to this. So I guess a good version of this that I can say is a raccoon pouch that the male raccoons have that the females don't. That gives them an extra thing that they can use for transforming, and he's actually transformed his into this nice big rug, and all of them are sitting on it, and then he just like retracts it, and they're just like, that's cool. My answer, I need therapy now. It's my answer to that if I was in that situation. So it's like you can use that using your transformation skills and everything like that. And those are kind of a running gag throughout the movie, is the raccoon pouch being used for different things. But I don't know how they got away with that when they were making this movie, but they did, and it still has a PG-13 rating for here. And I believe the Disney was the one that dubbed it, so I mean, okay, yeah, fun there. So we have that, and eventually you get to the point where enough of the raccoons have been, that they're ready to do kind of like a little kind of test runs going into the city. And we have this montage where we have that, like, the younger raccoons, the ones who are very good at transforming, are going into the city, and like they're all transformed into humans, and they kind of have like this human form that they can transform into, that is kind of, I guess, a version of like, oh, if you were a human, this is what you would actually look like, type of thing. So we see that, and then we also see that some of the older raccoons, Osho and Oroko and Sezemon, who is one of the former leaders of the different bands of raccoons, he's also pretty good at transforming too, and a little bit more practiced in it. So they're kind of like the driving instructors taking the kids on a field trip for driving lessons around the city so they can get used to being in the city. So we have those moments happening, and we have these different instances where, like, they have to deal with like traffic safety, so they have to figure out how to cross the street, and one of them doesn't quite make it, and then he ends up transforming into a raccoon again, but he ends up being fine, and then one's getting distracted by food, and we have this whole monologue thing over this whole bit that's just really funny, where it's also explained that when raccoons, reasons they have those circles under their eyes, the bags under their eyes, their mask, is because they get so exhausted from being transformed. And so they need to keep their energy up. So, that's why they have little pick-me-ups. And that's why there's been a boom in energy drinks, is because energy drinks are being become a big commodity because of all the raccoons that are transforming. So they have energy drinks, and that's why we have 5-hour energy now. And that's why we have 5-hour energy now. So blame the raccoons, thank the raccoons. I don't know. I've never been a big fan of energy drinks. Or coffee, for that matter. But so we have to see that, like, so we see them like, oh, they have like all these different like plans that they have. It's like, oh, if one of them shifts into the raccoon, someone else will pick them up and, use them and everything, and try to keep their energy up and everything like that until they can get to a safe area. So we see all of that, and eventually get to the point for like their final test is that they have to go into the human world and get a job and earn at least it's 1,000 yen, but it's like $10 is the way that it's done through like physical labor or something like that. So it's like you can prove that you can hold up your transformation for a certain amount of time. You're adept enough at dealing with humans that you can interact with them enough to get a job and get money and earn a salary and everything like that. So it's like, some of them go and like work on a construction site working as a team, all transformed as the same human. Some of them are, one of them is like a monk, collecting donations. Another one is like working at a karaoke bar, but she spends all her money on energy drinks. Another one ends up like winning, a bunch of money at like pachinko or whatever. One of them ends up stealing, trying to steal money, turns in and makes leaves into money, different things like that. So we have like all this little, moment there. We're having that little section there, which is just kind of funny. Eventually, right after the training is finished, Ganta's his birthplace, his childhood home, has been destroyed by all of the construction, and he becomes very angry about this. And he goes to the elders, and he's like, "No, we attack now. We move now," type of thing. And they're like, "But we're still in like the first year of our 5-year plan and everything like that." And it's like, Ganta's like, "I don't care. We're gonna go after the humans. We need to get payback on them or whatever. Make them leave our area alone." And they try, the elders try to talk Ganta down, but it doesn't work. Him, Shokichi, and a number of other raccoons head off to go and try to fight against the humans. But what happens before they leave is that Oroko ends up giving them a warning and one final little piece of advice. She's like, "If you end up getting caught, to protect our secret, you can always do this." And they're like, "What's that?" She goes, "Turn into a dead fox." So we have like that going on there, where it's like this reference back to the fact that like, foxes are one of the other animals that can transform, which comes up later on in the movie. And pretend to be a dead fox, so that way they don't think that it's raccoons that are doing all of this, which is smart. And what ends up happening is, of course, Ganta and Shokichi and a bunch of the other raccoons go to the construction site, and they end up causing numerous accidents. They make a vehicle think that it's driving across a bridge when it's not. It's really one of their pouches stretched out, and then the vehicle falls, the truck falls. Another one is they force a truck to drive off the side of a cliff because they make what looks like a tree falling. Another one is Ganta jumps on top of a truck and uses his raccoon pouch to like grow and cover the windshield, which makes the truck crash and everything like that. And it results in 3 of the humans dying, and the deaths of several of the humans. And of course this gets reported on the news, and of course the raccoons at the temple are watching all of this, and news reports are going on and everything like that, and they're like, "Oh well, the new Tama reconstruction thing is going to be we're gonna relook over what's going on." While all of that was happening, it was all raining and everything, so the raccoons are not being blamed. It's just being blamed on like poor visibility because of the bad weather and everything, so that's why it happened, as opposed to it being, the workers were being careless, or there were raccoons that came out of nowhere and transformed and tricked us and everything like that, and all of that stuff. So the raccoons end up getting really, really happy because they think that means that everything's fixed. It's not. But what ends up happening is Osho's like, 3 humans died because of us. We need to at least have a moment of silence. So they start, they all get like all like the funeral garb, the black clothes that they change themselves into and everything like that. And they're all, trying to do a nice prayer. Osho's trying to do a prayer against the humans and everything like that. And the raccoons, because raccoons cannot take anything seriously, end up getting just start laughing and everything like that, and then they run out and they start throwing this big party and everything like that. And when Ganta and Shokichi reappear along with their group, they end up getting like praised as heroes and everything like that, and they're like, you did it, and Ganta's like, well, that's just the start. We're gonna go and we're gonna destroy and crush every single human. And then it gets brought up that well, if we get rid of all of the humans, then where are we gonna get some of the food that the humans make? Like the hamburgers and popcorn and beef jerky and donuts and potato chips and pizza and chicken wings and different things like that. And we just see like Gata is trying to fight against how much he really likes all that food and trying to hold on to his anger, and he's just like, fine. I can't take it anymore. Yeah, we can keep some of the humans around. I guess we have no choice and everything like that. So we have like that funny thing happening there. But while all of that is happening, it ends up, back on the TV. It's like, no, the new Tama reconstruction thing will be continuing on. But like the raccoons had been like praising Ganta because they, were still like very proud of him and everything like that. And then he ends up getting dropped and he ends up getting kind of trampled when they're all running back to the television. So he's kind of out of commission for a little while, unfortunately. But it's like the construction will continue because they need this housing development and everything like that because of Tokyo and the booming of the population. So what ends up happening is they end up watching one of these talk shows or these news shows where they have these different, guys on talking about, hey, well, when we were developing Tama Hills, there were lots of different shrines and stuff like that in the area, and we had tried to do all of the proper, to move a shrine, you move statues and different things like that, you have to, do proper rituals and everything like that before the temple or the shrine can be moved. Otherwise it could anger the spirits there because, given the time frame, they were still a pretty superstitious country. Not that I blame them. I mean, we still have different things like that here in the United States as well. And in other countries all over the world have different, superstitions like that as a way of respecting, the old ways and stuff like that. But what ends up happening is they end up figuring out that we can use that to our advantage. So they start doing these moments where they are, they go to a farmer's land and like a bunch of them transform into different like Buddhist statues when he's there having a bunch of people from the new comma construction that are trying to decide if they want to buy the land or if he wants to sell the land. And he's like, oh, I got a lot more statues here than I thought. I may have to reconsider. Or another one is like another raccoon goes to a temple that's worshiping a white fox. When there's like a bunch of people there that are getting ready to move it, and he like transforms into the white fox and like runs around on top, screeches and runs away, and then like they just like all start bowing down and worshiping and saying that they won't move the temple and everything like that. So it's like, and then they also start making it seem like the area around New Tama is haunted and everything like that. So they're like having like lantern pops up and different things like that and messing with the humans. One of my favorite ones that they end up doing is there's this police officer that's riding along on his bike, and he ends up coming across this young woman who's like sitting there and crying and everything, and he's like checking on her and trying to make sure she's okay. So he's trying to do his job, for God's sake. He's trying to do the man's trying to do his job, and she ends up kind of doing the whole, revealing that she has like no face, which of course freaks him out, and he starts running, and then she gets on the bike and chases after him on the bike and then does it to him again. And he's just like freaking out even more, shoots his gun, which scares her. She falls off the bike, turns back into the raccoon, and she ends up being fine. But like, he's running off, and then he runs to the police station where he tries to talk to his superior, and he's freaking out. I was like, I just saw and the guy was like, a murder? And he's like, no. And he's like, oh well, darn, it's not a murder. Darn. He goes back to work, and the other guy's like, no, it was a lady. She was I don't know. And the guy's like, was she a vampire? And he's like, no, she. And he goes like, and the other police officer like makes his face go away, and he's like, was she like this? And it just, of course, just freaks out the other police officer even more, and he runs off again, even more freaked out. And the other police officer just gets his face back, goes back to work, so he's a raccoon and everything. And the other police officer that's been scared out of his mind already runs into a convenience store where, all of the customers end up turning to look at him, and they're like, did she look like this? And it's like none of them have faces, so he just freaks out even more and then just passes out in the doorway. Which I'm like, oh God, dude, I'm sorry. He's going to need therapy for the rest of his life. Sorry, dude. He's gonna need therapy. So they're all he's just freaking out and everything like that, and the raccoons just find it hilarious. And of course, it's stated that every time they scare a human, they throw a party. So they're constantly scaring humans and then constantly having parties and everything like that, which is funny. And Ganta's like watching all of this, and he's just like, this is ridiculous. Why are you all acting like this? We need to be more, hard on the humans or more, you know, dangerous to the humans, and then he ends up just hurting himself again and everything like that. So we have all of that happening. And eventually it is decided that, okay, it's time for us to go and try to find the transformation masters. So that means that they need to pick two of the different younger raccoons to determine who is going to go and be the ones to try to find the different transformation masters. They end up picking Thomas Saburo, who is supposed to be this very kind of dashing raccoon and everything like that. He turns into this very dashing human, and he is going to go to Shikoku Island to go to try to find the transformation masters there. And then Bunta, who is this more kind of robust but still very good at transforming and very strong raccoon, is going to go to Sato Island to try to find the transformation masters there. So the raccoons, you know, send them off, you know, with well wishes and everything like that, and they all head off. Then we have it that one day, okay, so there's a few other things that happen in here. There's one that is Shokichi and Kyo, who is this female raccoon. Shokichi is kind of like laying down at night in the grass after they've scared some humans. And he's just kind of like thinking about, well, what if Gonta is right? What if we do have to do a little bit more? What if we have to do less? What are we going to do and everything? And then Kyo shows up, and she clearly has a crush on Shokichi. And he's a little bit awkward when it comes to dealing with her, but he's very sweet. And she's, you know, attempting to flirt with him, but he's not getting it. And then it ends up being, they kind of end up, you know, talking with each other a lot, talking about like the different like raccoon songs and stuff like that. That they're familiar with. And she's like, well, you know, my grandfather got killed by a hunter, but he wasn't eaten. His pelt was sold for a lot of money and everything like that. And so it's like we have this like nice conversation between the two of them. And it ends up being, you know, it's like they end up playing like ball with like a ball that they've made and everything. And Kyo is pretty good at transforming too, just like Sokichi is. So we have that kind of going on where like they're kind of bonding over some of that stuff. And what ends up happening is they end up coming up with this twin star idea. Shokichi has this twin star idea as one of their next pranks to go up against the wizards. That was wrong. To go up against pranks, wizards, Weasley twins, Harry Potter, twin stars. I can see where that connects in my brain. Where they're going to go and scare the humans. So they go and do that together, and they turn into these two little girls that go to this barracks for where the construction people live, and they show up there, and they end up like freaking out the construction people because they're like, we just got back from a trip to the stars, and where's our home? And like they end up running around screaming, making wind blow into the place, run on the ceiling, different things like that, where they freak out the men, and then they just kind of vanish, which of course just makes them even more terrified. And of course, the construction people leave. They're like, nope, I'm not dealing with this. And they just leave. They quit. And of course, the raccoons are all celebrating and everything like that. And then, you know, we're kind of getting these, you know, as the months are going by and the seasons are changing and everything like that. But of course, more construction people come in because there's always more people willing to take the jobs in that regard. And so they just keep coming back, and they keep, you know, the construction keeps going and everything. And so we have all of that. And of course, it's getting to be autumn, so the raccoons need to work on, you know, building up food and fat stores and everything like that for the winter, so they can have good coats, so they'll be, you know, survive the winter and everything like that. You know, so we get a bunch of that going on. And winter comes, and one of the things that happens is, well, we just have like this nice little scene where we have the raccoons kind of singing a little bit and everything like that with Shokichi, and a bunch of the other young raccoons are just kind of like singing and having fun. And then we have it that Sokichi leads the raccoons who can't transform, so that way they can help. And they end up actually pushing like this, one of the construction equipment off one of the hills in the construction site, which the people who work at the construction sort of like, but it was raccoons, and the people in charge of them are like, no, you guys did it, and like it was never solved to this day, type of thing. So it's just causing more problems and everything like that and all of that. So we have a bunch of that stuff going on. And then we hit springtime again, where everybody gets Twitter pated again, and Sokachi and Kyo are like, all of the rest of the raccoons are like, fine. Like, after a year of not mating, they're like, okay, yeah, we're gonna do this and everything. So a bunch of them are getting married and having, you know, cubs and everything like that. And Sokachi is trying to, like, be very steadfast and be like, we can resist it, Kyo. We can just, you know, still be friends but not get married and have families and everything like that. And, you know, she's like, oh, Sokachi, and like, it's just so funny, because it's just like, he's trying to be so steadfast about it, and she's kind of trying to be too, but it doesn't end well. And they end up, we can do this, and nope. It's like, and, you know, they end up hugging them. It's like, you know what's gonna happen, and the narrator's like, that was a mistake. Because they kiss and everything, and it's just like, the narrator, that was a mistake. So it's like, yeah, they're together now, which they're adorable, and they end up having like 4 cubs. So we have like this sequence where we see a bunch of the different, specifically Sokachi and Kyo, you know, getting together. They have their cubs. They're very good parents and everything like that. And showing this where they, because like throughout the movie we see the raccoons shift from their more cartoony forms to their much more raccoon looking forms, and back again and into human forms, and different things like that, and different things in between, which is very interesting to do, because they would have had to have, most of the raccoons when they're in their straight up raccoon forms look pretty much the same. But then of course when they're in their individual more cartoony-ish on 2 legs form, they look much different. There's like certain ones have different colored fur, different, you know, patterns under their eyes. Some of them have slightly different hair. Some of them have like a scarf or a coat or something like that that they wear to distinguish them from other people within the group, from other raccoons within the group and everything. So we get like these different character designs that they would have gone through and figured up ahead of time for, like, this one's this one's this. These 2 may have similar outfits, but they have like different coloring in the outfits for some of what the females wear, and everything like that. So a lot of them have very distinctive looks. And there's some raccoons that we really only see a couple of times, but they're more just like background characters. They're not particularly involved in what's going on. So, and of course, with all of this development of cubs coming along, that there ends up being, there ends up being a lot of these, there's more, that's more food that's needed, and there's less food in the forest. So there's a lot of that going on, which kind of, disrupts some of their plans and everything. And, during this time frame, they're talking about like, well, we can't wait for Tamasaburo, and, we just have to, we have to wait for Tamasaburo and for Bunta to get back from their islands, to come back with the transformation masters. Also, at one point while all of this is going on, a strange raccoon shows up in their area, and he ends up getting found by Sokachi and Oroko when they're out, and he gets brought back to the temple. And they initially think he's a transformation master, and he's like, oh no, I'm not a transformation master, I'm from like the other side of the mountains, because they keep dumping dirt in our area, and I was trying to figure out where it was coming from, because it keeps polluting our water, so I came here. I wasn't expecting it to come from another forest and everything. So it's like not only is there being construction done in New Tama, there's all of this dirt and everything like that from Tama Hills is being taken over the mountain and illegally dumped in this other part of the forest, where it's polluting the water and messing with the animals there. So it's all of this stuff going on. That's just causing more and more trouble. And, we get that, and then of course we cut to where we find out what's been going on with Tamasaburo, and he has actually managed to find his way to the island he was sent to. He managed to get there and get to the temple and find the elders, tell them his plea, and then unfortunately he became very ill, and he gets nursed back to health by Koharu, who is actually the daughter raccoon of one of the transformation masters. And as spring came, they ended up, developing, they developed a very close bond, and then she bore him 3 cubs and everything like that. And at this temple, the way that the temple is designed, and I love how they designed this, is that the transformation masters do live at the temple, but they all have these human forms that they use, so that way they act as like priests and different things like that work at the temple. And because they're on this much more isolated island, they have managed to keep it that there hasn't been all of this huge amount of development and deforestation on their island. So that means that, and they kind of live alongside the humans, and the humans actually worship at this temple. So we have that. So like Tamasaburo and Koharu are together, and we see them in like the robes of like people that would work at a temple. Like she's like a priestess, and he's kind of like one of the different monks or priests that would be at the temple and everything. And then, like, their kids run around and everything like that. So they interact with humans a lot more, and she probably grew up transforming into a human a lot, to be around the humans and everything like that. And they have this conversation where she begs Tamasaburo not to go back, because the elders have been taking like 6 months to figure out what they want to do, and we cut inside and see what the elders are doing. And it kind of looks like they're playing a card game, but they're also like actually discussing stuff and everything like that about what they can do and like who's gonna go, because it's a big thing that they're talking about. Like also, it's like we don't just want to show up there; we want to show up there and have a plan ready, so that way we can give hope to the raccoons that are there, to the new Tama raccoons. So we need to work on figuring that up. So they want to have this plan, and it's like there's a good chance that one of them could die during this whole process. Based on what their plan is, and so they want to have backup plans ready for like, okay, who's going to take over their position here at the temple for those different things. So we have that all discussion going on, but Koharu is begging Tamasaburo not to go back. She's like, but I can't stand it if you leave, it'll break my heart, and what about me and your children and everything like that. And he's like, but I wish you would understand, but I do have to go back because, this is my home. And she's like, no, I don't understand. And, so we have this whole, discussion there and everything like that, which is a rightful discussion that the two of them have to have, and everything. But eventually it's, it loops around where it's, it's autumn again in New Tama Hills, moves on to summer and autumn. And we have this nice little sequence that is kind of shown via like a video game setup, where it's like, as the construction happens, the forest is getting smaller. But because so many of them had cubs this year, that means the population is growing. And there's more raccoons in a smaller area, so there's less food. And so it's like we have this like video games simulation going on there, that I guess they managed to find some form of a video game and they're using that or something. I don't know. But we're seeing that there. So that's causing problems. So it's caused this rise in the population and everything like that. Eventually what ends up happening is there end up, because of this rise in the population, many of the different raccoons, even the ones who can't, the ones who can transform, go into town and they try to gather up trash or different things that they can buy and bring back to Tama Hills, so that way they can feed it to the other raccoons and everything. And even the raccoons who can't transform are trying to find ways to help. Like they're trying to sneak onto farms. Some of them try to steal chickens. And unfortunately, this results in a lot of them getting either hit by cars or caught in animal traps. And so there's a lot of stuff that's going on there, which again is just showing this, hazards that come up with having animals close to, humans and everything, particularly where vehicles are involved. And everything, and it's, you can't blame the humans for wanting to protect their own livestock or their own crops and everything like that, but it's also, it's, we're telling this movie from the point of view of the raccoons, so you feel sympathy for the raccoons in this regard, for the animals that would be in this type of a situation. And so we get to see a lot of that. And so they have this other big, meeting and everything. And Shokichi's like, well, we need to have some other backup plans. We need to, do traffic safety. We need to have those who can go into the city to get food do so. And we need to have it that there are teams ready to help save any raccoons that get caught in traps. And he gets accused of sounding very much like a human. And Gonta ends up trying to have a coup And he like declares war on the humans, and he brings in a bunch of his, personal guard, as he refers to them, come in, and they try to hold the rest of the raccoons hostage, which really doesn't do anything. He actually like turns his fingers into a gun, and like threatening them. I'm like, would that hurt if he shot it, or I'm not sure how that would work. Maybe that's where Oda got the idea for the Buki Buki no Mi that Baby 5 has. Okay, I don't know. It's like, I saw a raccoon turn his hand into a gun, and I was inspired. I don't know. I'm quite certain that Oda has probably seen some of these different Miyazaki movies at various points in time, or various Studio Ghibli movies at different points in time. But what ends up happening is, because all of the raccoons are so hungry, they end up getting into an argument about what type of tempura is the best. And like, it's mouse tempura, it's cooked, it's grilled, it's fried, it's all this other stuff. And they're like, we can't worry about this. We're just too hungry to do anything. And he, Gata gets angry, and he's trying to go up against him, and he's just like, no, mouse tempura is the best. Yes, it is. And so it's just like, see, we're so hungry, we can't fight. I can't think of anything but food and everything like that. And Gata just kind of like, sorry about that. He just like sits back down, and I guess his guards just kind of leave. So we kind of have that. Which is just like, okay, he literally just held all of you as hostages and tried to perform a coup, and you're willing to just instantly forgive him. Which is just funny and weird, but he's just like, yeah, okay, I'm sorry about that. Which is just funny. And then we have it that it's time for the Transformation Masters to arrive. So Tamasaburo has managed to return to Tokyo with 3 of the different transformation masters from Shikoku Island. And I love their entrance, because I love the way that all 3 of them are dressed. I'm like, what fashion sense did they try to do? What were they trying to go for? Dumbledore at a rave? Because they certainly nailed it. Because in the Harry Potter books, so much of what Dumbledore is described as wearing is like very bright colors with fun patterns and stuff like that for like at least the first couple of books. They don't do that as much, particularly in the ones where Michael Gambon is playing him, but in the first 2 movies he's a little bit more colorful. Rest in peace, Michael Gambon. And I don't remember who played Dumbledore in the first 2 movies, but now we've lost both of them. I want to say William Hartnell, but I don't know if that's correct or not, and it probably isn't. It's not, because he was the first Doctor, so no, that's not him. I don't remember who played the first Dumbledore. Sorry. But what ends up happening is I love their character design, and they just like swagger their way on from this train into this train station, and everybody is just watching them. And they put a car, and it's just like, what's going on? Who are these people? It's just really funny. And they make their way back to Tama Hills, where they make their way to the temple through the construction. And they get their way there, and Tamasaburo runs ahead to report that he's brought them, and he's so exhausted from it, but he's like, I achieved my mission, and he kind of like faints a little bit, and Shokichi and the others are like, you did great, and like the 3 masters come flying in, and like superheroes, and they land, and they change into their raccoon's form, and there's 3 of them. Gyobo, who is a slightly more gruff, terrifying looking raccoon. Hage, who is soon to be 999 years old, who is like the oldest raccoon ever. And then Kincho, who is this slightly younger looking, still older, but not as old as the other 2. And he is actually the one who Tamasaburo's he's Tamasaburo's father-in-law for all intents and purposes. Tamasaburo married his daughter. And they seem to get along fine. From the interactions that we see them have, they seem to get along fine. So there's no animosity there. But like, you got my daughter, you gave cubs to my daughter. No, they get along fine. I mean, Tomasaburo would have proved that he was brave anyway for the fact that he was trying to go and find them in order to help his group of raccoons. So that's probably something that endeared Tomasaburo to Kincho. So they show up and they're like, okay, call a meeting of all the raccoons, and all of the raccoons gather that night. And they end up giving this big speech about, like, so what we're planning on doing is going to be this big, the reason that the humans have, decided to do this and are not respecting your forest anymore is because you have neglected your art of transformation. You have not continued to scare them or pretend to be deities or different things like that in order to keep the humans scared of the forest. Whereas we on our island all have these different forms that we take that are worshipped in various parts of the island, as ways to protect our forest and everything like that. And they say we're going to do Operation Spectre, which is going to be this huge thing where we use so much of our transformation magic and everything like that to make this giant kind of, it turns into like a ghost parade and specter parade and everything like that goes through Tokyo and goes through the new Tama development and everything like that to like scare everybody, is what their intention is. And they're like, we know that that one of us may not survive this and everything like that, but this is what is required, and we want to do this, and we want to help all of you and everything like that. So they have all of that going on, and they, all of the raccoons work on practicing and, being able to fuel. So there's the ones who can transform, and then there's ones who can't, but even the ones who can't transform can still work with like generating mental energy to try to support what is going on and how to allow all the raccoons to like draw on that power. For the ones who are transforming and everything and leading this, instance here. So they work on training all of that stuff, and during that time frame is when Master Hage turns 999, so they have this big party for him and make this giant cake and everything like that. So we have that fun bit there. And then they get to Operation Spectre, where they get going, and it's, it's a beautiful night, and all the raccoons are chanting and getting all energized and building up all of this energy, and the three masters are, using so much of their own energy, and it's also helping them draw in the power from nature around them and everything like that to help fuel this. And they turn into this huge parade of these many spirits and specters and strange things and yokai and ghosts, which I know yokai and ghosts are similar things, and different things like that they end up, turning into all of these different things. Dragons and monsters and, demons and all this other stuff that is like very prevalent within Japanese mythology, and a lot of this stuff that I wouldn't be able to necessarily identify what it is right off the bat, but is stuff that I've seen depicted in other types of either Japanese anime or shows before. So we see a lot of that as they're like moving through, and like as you're going through and watching, Porco's plane from Porco Rosso appears in the background. Kiki appears flying in the sky. Totoro appears flying in the sky. And the little girl from Only Yesterday appears in the sky as well. So we have lots of different references to other Ghibli movies that fly through the sky during this sequence, which is nice. And of course, so we have all of that, and they're making their way into New Tama Hills and everything, and all the people are just like, what the heck is going on? There's like a parade, like a fox wedding, and so many other different things that keep going by. And people get scared, or people are just like, oh my god, amazed by a bunch of this. So there's like so much stuff that's happening. And they're like, what is going on? And, some of the stuff's scary, some of it's beautiful, some of it's sweet, some of it's just kind of cool to look at. And I would be freaking out too if a bunch of this stuff was going through in my area and being like, what the heck is going on? So we get to see all of that. And I think one of my favorite bits that happens, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it's like, there are these two drunks that are just sitting at this, food stall. And while they're sitting there drinking, behind them we see so many of these different things happening, like this giant skeleton and these different monsters and like all the stuff going by behind them. And the two drunks are just talking about like, yeah, I used to see stuff like that when I was a kid too. Monsters in the closet, things like that. And they're like, yeah, when you're young, it seems surreal. I swear I saw these ghosts dancing on my ceiling, and like they're just going back and forth, and they're just continuing to drink while they're doing this, and just behind them it's just extra funny because like we see all these different things happening behind them and everything, and they're like, yeah, ghosts don't really exist and everything like that. It's just like, yeah, it must be your brain playing tricks on you when you were young, and things like the boogeyman and monsters in the closet, and they're all in your head because of all the scary stories people tell you as a kid. It plants the seeds in your brain as a kid. So as a kid, you think it's real and everything. So they're just like laughing back and forth, and they're like, yeah, kids are suckers because there's no way these ghost stories are real. Still, they frighten you half to death. Yep, the brain is scary that way. You think things and then you see them. It's like, it's if your imagination, and like one of them is like slowly turns and like looks behind him and actually sees all of the different things that are happening behind him, all the strange things running around to this guy, and he's just like, there really are monsters out there. And the other drunk is just like, see? We talk about ghosts, and then you start to see them. So it's just like, I love this interaction. I love that interaction. That's one of my favorite interactions in the whole movie. Because it's just like, all the funny stuff is happening behind them, and they're just like, what of that? No. The other one, oh my god, it's real. The other one, yep, you're drunk. It's like, oh, you're both drunk, and the other one's at least looking at the stuff. So we have that whole thing there that's happening. And what ends up happening is, while this is going on, Gyobo, who is kind of the one, ends up exerting himself far too much, and he actually ends up dying. And everybody in the parade, all the different raccoons that are part of this, notice what's happening because they can sense it, because like there's this huge drop in the power levels that are coming. And all of them are like, oh, we got to get out of here. So like they're trying to rush back as fast as they can. And, in the movie we witness as like these, the representation of like Buddhist gods or Shinto gods come down and like scoop up Gyobu's soul and like whisk him off to the afterlife and everything. So all of the raccoons end up, having a funeral for him and everything. And they end up kind of turning that into like a celebration for like the successes of Operation Spectre, because it's just like, of course we've managed to, pull this off and everything like that, and it's gone well, and Gyobo would have been proud of what we have achieved and everything. But like after all the stuff went away, most of the people are just like, oh well, that was interesting, okay, I guess time to go back inside, type of thing. It's like, oh, it's over already. So it's like some of them were initially scared, but after a bit it's just like, wonder what that was. And like the next day or whatever, there is this human who is the president of this new theme park called Wonderland, who actually goes on television, and he takes credit for what happened. And he's, claiming that it was a publicity stunt and everything like that for their park, which makes all of the raccoons very, very angry, because it's like, he stole our credit for this. He took credit for all of this. And, he took credit for our hard work, and now no one's going to believe that it was us. And Osho is kind of the one that takes it the hardest. I think Gata ends up breaking the television, which is funny. But Osho kind of was like, but we're the ones that did it. It was us. We should get credit for it. And everything like that. So it's like pride coming into the way there. I sound stuffed up, and I don't know why. It's like 30-something degrees outside. What pollen is in the air? But what ends up happening is the guy who's the president of the theme park of Wonderland ends up getting talked to by this guy who kind of whispers in his ear that, well, maybe it was raccoons, and like he's trying to get them to find the people that put on the parade to hire them for Wonderland. And this guy Ryotaro, who is this human, he's a fox that can transform into a human, and he's trying to negotiate a deal where he's like, well, if I can find them, I want like a certain amount of money or whatever, thing like that. So we're having that instance, and what ends up happening is Ryotaro ends up encountering or coming across Master Kincho, and he reveals that he's a fox, and Kincho, of course you would know, as a fox, of course you would know that it was us raccoons that did that. And Ryotaru ends up bringing Kincho into this very nice nightclub setup or whatever, where there's a bunch of these beautiful women and amazing food and everything like that. And so we're having all of that, and Ryotaru is trying to convince Kincho to have it that all of the raccoons who can transform come and work at Wonderland and everything, and they can have like a very nice way of living. They can still use their powers, and it'll be amazing, and you'll get a good amount of money and everything like that. So he's trying to make him this offer and everything like that. And Kincho is like, well, what about all the raccoons who can't transform? And he's like, Ryotaru's like, that was kind of what happened with us. It was, all of us foxes that could transform, we all left and moved into the city and took on, the guises of humans and everything. And we've been living well ever since. But look at it this way. Unlike us, raccoons can eat almost anything. So even if a bunch of you take on the forms of humans and go and live in the human world, all the other ones may have a better chance of, succeeding and surviving and everything. So we're having that kind of conversation. And Kincho doesn't want to go along with it, but he brings the offer back to the other raccoons. While a lot of this is going on, there's, some other instances where, Sato or Shokichi and Gata are like arguing about different stuff and everything like that. And everything, and they're like, well, maybe we need to work on Operation Spectre 2 and make it even bigger and better and everything like that. So we're having those types of things. And at this point in time, Oroko is just kind of like, I don't think the humans are going to fall for our pranks anymore. I don't think it's going to work. So there's like a bunch of different stuff like that. And Kincho shows up and he gives them this, this offer. He's like, well, okay, I at least should give them the offer and they can go from there and make their choice. This is not my home. I will eventually be going back to the island, but, I at least want to see what I can help with these guys here. And he ends up giving them the option to go and work at Wonderland, which all of them are just like immediately, no, we don't want to do that. And he's like, okay, well, I at least wanted to make sure that you knew what was going on. And, what ends up happening is Osho, the monk, the really old one, has like sent off a letter to the TV station saying that it's from the Tama Hills raccoons and everything like that they were the ones that put on the parade. So he's trying to do that. And then we also have it that at this point in time, Master Hage has kind of just finally gone senile, and he begins to lead a bunch of the different non-transforming raccoons in like a Buddhist dancing cult and everything like that. So there's a bunch of that there that's just kind of happening. So he's finally lost it, and Kincho, Master Kincho kind of comments on that, and he's just like, 999 years old and he's been fine, and then he's been in Tokyo for a couple of months and now he's snapped. So there's that. And then Tamasaburo and Kincho end up having this conversation, and Tamasaburo is like, I want to go back to the island. I want to go back. I want to be with Koharu and our cubs, and I want you to train me to become your successor and everything like that. And they have this very good talk, and Kincho brings up some good points about the fact of like, is it just because you want to get back to my daughter, or why, or that type of stuff. And it's not being mean to Tamasaburo, it's just like, it's a valid thing that needs to be brought up in this instance. And what ends up happening is they're like, okay, well, I think I have a way of we can work on this. And they work on planning this way to get a bunch of the money from Ryotaru and the Wonderland president. So what they end up doing is they end up making this giant cat statue that's like the little cat with like the arm or whatever, and they bring in Ryotaru and the president and from Wonderland and some others, who are trying to deliver like this down payment for their services, and brings them in, and they, you know, kind of show off some of their transforming skills, and then they end up basically knocking them out of the cat statue, making the suitcase open up that has all the money in it, sucking all the money into the giant cat statue, and then flying away. And the president and Ryotaro are like, oh my god, they took our money. And then they try to go, like, they say, raccoons took our money to the police. And they're just like, yeah, no. my money was taken by a shape-shifting raccoon. Here's the permit form, sir. Please fill this out. Here's the incident report. We'll get back to you when we can. Type of thing. You know, nobody believes them. Which is just funny. And now they have this money that they can use to fund future endeavors if necessary. So they work on that. Eventually what ends up happening is Gonta has finally gotten to the point where he is just fed up with everything, and him and a bunch of his followers end up going to where the construction is in part of the forest area where they haven't gotten to yet, and they basically kind of end up being like using guerrilla tactics as like eco-terrorists to scare the humans and everything like that. And so we get to see a bunch of this stuff going on there, and different things that are there to like terrify the cops and the construction people and everything, which ends up coming to a head. And what ends up happening is we have kind of like two things culminating at the same time, or three things that kind of end up culminating at the same time. Gonta and the others and his group are finally like, okay, we are sick and tired of this. We're just going to do a huge attack on them and go against the police and everything like that. Go against the riot police, which doesn't usually end up ending well. In this case, it doesn't. So we have three things happening simultaneously. So Gonta and his group, earlier in the movie at one point in time, they had made this trip to the library where they were Oroko took them to the library and was showing them all these different like myths about tanukis that are part of, you know, human society and human myths and everything like that in Japan. And Gonta had seen this image of the raccoon dog, the tanuki, using his raccoon pouch in order to smother a human. And Gonta kind of is now going to use that as part of his plan here. And he does. And him and a bunch of the others end up, you know, stretching out their pouches as big as they can and inflating them and using those to try to attack the police. And they end up getting beaten by the police during all of this. And this whole thing is happening for them. While that's happening, Tamasaburo and Shokichi and one of the others goes to try to stop them, but they're too late. And then on the other end of the forest, a news crew has showed up, and they are trying to talk to the raccoons. And they kind of do the Mr. Raccoon, won't you talk to me today, or whatever. And they're like, no, we can't. We are too hungry now. And so it's like this rhyming thing back and forth, I guess, the call and response type of a thing that they do with the raccoons. I don't know where that came from in Japanese mythology, but it's there. And what ends up happening is Osho ends up coming out, and like they've been informed of the fact that like Gonta and his group have been killed by the riot police. And so Gonta's wife is just sobbing, which is fair, and the others are very sad at this point in time as well, but they're like, okay, well, we have to at least try this. So they end up, Osho walks out as like the tanuki statue, and then he's kind of like scared, so Oroko comes out, and both of them end up like on camera talking, and she's like, the forest of Tama Hills are our home, so you can't keep destroying all of them. This plea is from every living creature in the forest, and like all of the raccoons end up transforming in front of the camera into all of these different creatures and everything like that, running around, turning into birds, and then flying away and everything, to the news crew. So we're having all of that, and so those two things kind of happen, one right after the other. And then the last thing that happens, is Master Hage has and his cult of non-transforming raccoons finally decide to leave. So they stretch his pouch out as far as it will go, and he turns it into this great ship filled with all of these treasures and food and everything like that. And they all climb onto the ship and they start sailing down the Tama River. And they're like, yeah, there's this great monologue that comes out of this. I will read the monologue, but there's also, while this is happening, while we're watching as this is happening with Master Hage and his group, there is also Gonta and his group are kind of like, I guess, turning into like zombie raccoons, I guess. Their anger hasn't quite finished, and it allows them to transform again into this giant, bouncing, evil-looking head that causes problems, bounces onto several cars, and then gets like hit by a truck, and then the raccoons actually die. So we're seeing that happen alongside this, where Master Hage and his group are leaving, sailing down the river, and this is being witnessed by Shokichi and his group. So the big monologue that kind of we get is this like epitaph to Master Hage is, see if I can get through all of this. Master Hage, the last surviving witness of the age of the samurai, was 999 years old. Over the years, he had earned many honors and seen many fascinating sights. But now he had seen enough, and he decided to bid the world farewell. With a song of triumph, the raccoon stretched Master Hage's pouch to the limit and turned it into a magnificent ship, trimmed with gold and loaded to the hilt with exotic treasures. Dreaming of their heavenly destination, a large number of raccoons who could not transform boarded Master Hage's great ship. They danced and sang in joyous celebration of leaving this world of suffering behind. And so, on that kind of moonlit night that Master Hage adored, the ship set sail on the Tama Hills River, pulled along by a balmy breeze. Gently the raccoons drifted off towards Nirvana. They partied like never before, and the Pom Poko sound of the raccoons beating their bellies like drums could be heard throughout Tama Hills until the wee hours of the night. Although they knew the raccoons aboard the ship were happy, the raccoons that were left behind could do nothing but weep. As if in a dream, the ship sailed past forest and field, shrouded in mist. The raccoons aboard the ship strained to see through the fog and catch a glimpse of their glorious destination, despite the fact that the closer they got to paradise, the closer they were to death. And so the ship crossed over to the next world, and the raccoons sailed away on a trip from which they would never return. Which, I mean, that's a lot of faith. I will give them that. That's just one of those moments where you're just like, oh my god. And like, yeah, a bunch of the other raccoons, the main group of the ones that can't transform are watching as like these others sail away. And as that happens, it is revealed that Bunta, who is the raccoon that was sent to Sato Island, has finally returned. But he says that, no, I wasn't able to find the transformation master there because he was killed for food several years ago. And, now he's back and he's seeing what happened to the landscape. And he is very angered by it. And he's like, so, what has been happening to our forest? It's only been 3 years. I feel like Rip Van Winkle. And Shokichi is like, we did everything we could to try to stop it. And Bunta's like, every inch of the woods are changed. How could the land be so transformed? And Tamasaburo is like, we're so sorry. This must come as quite a shock. And Bunta is like, so the humans did it themselves? And Kyo is crying, and she's like, that's right. They transformed all of Tama Hills. And Bunta is like, but how? Only raccoons should be able to do that. We're the only ones. And he's like rushing off, and he's just like shouting at the city. And it's like, who do you think you are, you stupid humans? Raccoons are the only ones who transform things. How can you do this? How can you do this? sinking to his knees and beating the ground. He was like, the only way this makes sense is if all of you humans are raccoons. You're all stupid, evil, selfish raccoons. And he's just like sobbing and howling into the night, which is fair. And again, it's like, this movie is told from the perspective of the raccoons. And yes, it is about deforestation. It is about wrenching animals away from their homes and putting humans where the animals are normally supposed to live and everything like that. So there's a lot of stuff that's being shown there and everything. And it's like, yes, the animals are very valid in having this anger towards the humans. And all of that. So we see all of that. And what ends up happening is the raccoons finally admit defeat, and they're like, but we're gonna go out with one last hurrah. We're gonna show them what really can, the better way to transform this land, and we're gonna do it one last time. And so all of the raccoons who can transform, and the ones who remained who can't, including Pokichi, I think, who is Shokichi's friend. All of them gather, and they offer up their mental power that they can build up to help with the transforming. And we watch as they transform from like part of the construction site, and it just spreads out through like New Tama Hills, the development, as they just like bring back the forest and the farmlands and everything the way that it had been before all of the construction happened. And like people are like running out of their houses or running out of their balconies to like watch as this happens and everything. And like they're just amazed by what they see and everything. And that would just be one of those moments where you're just like, oh my god, what is all of this? How is this happening? And everything. And we see that from the people for their different reactions. And they're not trying to garner attention. They're just, the raccoons aren't trying to garner attention for the animal's plight. They're just like, we're showing you a way that you can coexist with, animals and humans can coexist together and everything. So we're just seeing that. And all of that is being shown there. And eventually, they kind of it ends up stopping because, and we get this shift back where we kind of jump ahead a little bit, and it's revealed that a lot of the raccoons who could transform moved into the city and took on their human guises and everything like that. And some go into real estate, some go into this, some go into that, some have office jobs, different things like that. And one last monologue that we get here, where it starts off as Shokichi, and partway through it ends up shifting into the voice of the narrator to be that the whole story is actually being told by Shokichi. In general, that he is the narrator in the end. So we have it that the last kind of monologue that we get is like, after that, our last hurrah, Mampuko Temple was knocked down, and the new Tama development continued without delay. Soon residents settled in, and the town became an ideal place for humans to live. In fact, the hill where the temple stood is now the most popular site for section of the development. Also, I'm happy to report that revealing ourselves to the humans did have a positive effect. Now humans are concerned about preserving nature, and they're setting aside little bits of forest that they develop for parks and nature preserves. Even the newspapers published articles proposing various ways to help humans and raccoons to coexist. Unfortunately, these changes came too late for our group of raccoons to benefit. Some of us tried moving to the other side of Tama Hills, where some forest and farmland still remained, but there were raccoons already living there, of course. And with all the construction and the traffic in the area, it was a daily struggle to survive. So we finally gave in and followed Kincho's advice. Those of us who could transform followed in the fox's footsteps and started living as humans. Some raccoons sold real estate, unable to resist the money they could make promoting leveling even more forests. I got a prime piece of forest, so we're having all of that, and it's just like, I now have a desk job. With my wife, Kyo works at a snack bar, but most
could barely handle the stress of living in the human world, and they wanted nothing more than to return to the hills. I'm constantly impressed by the humans. It takes a lot of stamina to live the way they do. Eventually, many of the raccoons quit their desk jobs and started begging and living in the streets. As for Pokichi and the others who couldn't transform, they adopted a lifestyle perfectly suited for raccoons. They lived for the moment, knowing their lifestyle was dangerous, and they may be dangerous. They made sure to fully experience life each day and never letting the destruction of their homelands or accidents on the road get them down. They had cubs, relaxed, ate, drank, and died, all too soon. And so as we're getting this monologue, we're seeing as, Shokichi is now a human and everything like that. We saw that Tomasaburo and Kincho went back to the island, and, Tomasaburo is being trained to become the successor and everything like that. So we see all of that. We also see how the other raccoons are still living, and we see that one night, Shokichi on his way home back to Kyo and their children ends up coming across Pokichi and Pokichi, whatever, his friend, and he follows him through this crack in the wall, and he ends up running to where all these other non-transforming raccoons are, and they're having this party on this golf course. So he is kind of like there, seeing them and having like a fun time there. Seeing his friends again and everything like that, and seeing that they're still okay. So we have all of that taking place. And the one that actually gets kind of the last word in it is Pokichi, who actually turns to the camera and he's like, and I'm gonna paraphrase this because I don't actually have the monologue on here that he has, or the statement that he has here. He's like, they say that a lot of animals are disappearing, but I don't think that's entirely true. Yes, well, foxes and raccoons may have disappeared to a degree, but what about other animals who can't transform, like badgers and deer and, squirrels and things like that? So it's supposed to be this thing where it's like, yes, well, you do know that there are, that's, kind of the raccoons all kind of joined humans, but what about all the other ones who can't transform and who can't change and who can't, live as easily among humans without getting hurt and everything like that? So it's, it's this very nature conscientious way of ending the movie and such. So I do like how they pull that off. And that's basically where the movie ends. In regards to cast, so Sokichi is voiced by Jonathan Taylor Thomas, so Home Improvement, and Simba, if I'm remembering correctly, as young Simba. Gonta is Clancy Brown, who has done quite a bit. Oroko, as I said, is Tress MacNeille, amazing. J.K. Simmons plays Sizemon, who I'm definitely mispronouncing. We have Kevin Michael Richardson as Bunta, who is just one of the other side ones. We have John DiMaggio as Ryotaro. He's also plays one of the drunks. I think Maurice LaMarche plays the other drunk. There's several others. Russi Taylor is in here. She's Minnie in a lot of the Minnie from Minnie Mouse stuff and everything like that from Disney for a good long time in the 90s and the 2000s and the early 2010s and everything like that. And then Maurice LaMarche is, of course, the narrator / he's one of the other drunks and everything like that. So we have like this, it's a very good cast here. None of them are exceedingly big names at the time, but they ended up being big names later. They've gotten better type of things or different things like that. So I love this movie. I love how it's designed. I love the fact that they basically took a movie that on the surface can appear to be just a story about raccoons using their raccoon pouches in order to fight humans. And turn it into this whole thing about it being like a nature conscientious thing about like we have to take care of the nature that is around us, because if we don't, it's not going to be good for us and it's not going to be good for the animals, because there's a delicate ecosystem balance that needs to be taken care of here. So that's what we have there. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I believe the next one on this list is Whisper of the Heart, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!